Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, it looks like it's true. I've heard different people saying how they'd been censored for something or other on Facebook. And I was like, no, probably not. Probably just somebody didn't like what you said and they complained. But no, there is censoring going on, that's for sure. As a little kind of like funny comment to someone's post about Krishna and the cows, I found this article about a man in India who every day he takes the calf, one of the calves, and takes him for a ride in his car. And it showed a picture of the calf sitting in the driver's seat with his head sticking out of the car, and the man standing there, affectionately to the calf. And it was just cute, I thought, only in India, But Facebook censored it. I got this, all these flags all over it, and you violated community guidelines, and I'm like, really? And so I guess what it is they have these automatic, like robots going around scouring all the posts and comments. And this may have looked like animal abuse. That's the only thing I could think of, was they thought it was animal abuse, because it was unusual to have a calf sitting in a car with his head sticking out the driver's side. So must have thought, the robot thought it was animal abuse. You don't usually see a calf in a car. Hare Krishna. So it is going on, and posts are being monitored and censored for what they're programmed to be censored for. Evidently animal abuse, talking about the virus, different kinds of things is being censored. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. It's a good thing Krishna isn't on the blacklist. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Well, the weather's changed here. It's Florida, but it's North Florida. It was really cold. It was 73. Well, I was shivering. I had to put a fleece jacket on. So, the devotee that was visiting here a while ago left this jacket. So, I inherited his jacket. Hare Krishna, find some more. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So I was going to read a little bit more about Jada and how he meets King Rahugana. It's the first time Jada actually speaks. He's appearing to be deaf, dumb, dull, because he doesn't want to be involved in any social activity or economic activity or anything. He just wants to remember Krishna. But here, he begins to speak. He hasn't spoken. But now he starts to speak. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. He's got a lot to say too. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. I'm looking at it because he's confronted a king. Now, he used to be a king. He was actually the emperor of the entire planet. And his meditation got off, and when he was preparing to leave his body and he was in the forest performing austerities, he got attached to a deer, like a pet. And he had to come back in a deer body. And then when that was through, he had full consciousness the whole time. When that was through, he took birth in a Brahmin family. But this time, he didn't want anything to do with anything. He didn't want to be a Brahmin. He just wanted to remember Krishna. And he appeared to be dull, like a retarded person or something. So, what I'm looking at, hey, Hare Krishna, Lance, Haribol, or is that Madhu? Somebody's here, Haribol. Is that this may be the first time that he met a king, because he used to be the royal order. Hey, Madhu, Haribol. And he knew what happened to him, and he was in the royal order. He had everything. And so he's confronted with a king. And he was a king. He was an emperor. He's confronted with a king who's in illusion and a little puffed up with his royal position. And that's when he begins to speak. I was a king. You're a king. Next time, you could be me. He tries to help him. And it's the first time he speaks to anyone. Hare Krishna, Krishna's arrangement, obviously. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, And it's good for Bharata that he's speaking, because glorifying the Lord and speaking the absolute messages of Godhead, that's devotional service. He was remembering. That's also devotional service, but now he gets a chance to speak, to glorify. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama. In order for there to be the successful transmission of transcendental knowledge, there has to be a qualified speaker in line of succession, not changing the messages of Godhead, no separate agendas, and a qualified hearer, someone who simply is open to hearing. So it has to be both things for the communication to take place. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. A couple more mantras and toward fulfilling my vow of 16 rounds. Well, I still have a lot more rounds, but at least this one round. Hare Krishna. I have it under my belt. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari 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 Rama, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. It's really great. Success in spiritual life, I'm starting to see, it doesn't depend on anything else except Krishna's mercy. It doesn't depend on being right about anything, or winning an argument, or somebody else's failure is my success. And spiritual life doesn't depend on any of that. It just depends on Krishna's mercy. That's all. Happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, takes on a whole new dimension. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is the 5th Canto, Part 1 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, translated with commentaries, word for word, transliterations, Sanskrit, and elaborate purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. This is chapter 10. So far, Jada Bharat, he's been in his birth as Jada Bharat, the deaf and dumb son of a Brahmin. He's not really deaf and dumb. He just acts like that because he, go away, leave me alone. I just want to remember Krishna. And he's not even bathing. He just eats whatever anybody will offer him, and his stepmother and his stepbrothers, because his mother and father passed away, so his stepmother and his stepbrothers, they're mistreating him, they're giving him abominable foods to eat. He's just eating it anyway. It's just Hare Krishna. And he was kidnapped by a group of thieves, dacoits, criminals, and they wanted to offer him as a man-animal sacrifice to Goddess Kali. They made it up. There's no such thing in the Vedas. They just made it up. They thought it would be nice to slit his throat and offer the blood to Bhadra Kali. That she would like that. They just made it up. Well, she didn't like that. And especially, he's a pure devotee of the Lord, her master. She's a servant of Krishna, and he's a pure devotee of her. And she especially didn't like that. So she just got all her friends, witches, female demons, whatever. They all came and killed all the thieves and dacoits. So he didn't even do anything. He was just sitting there. Well, if it's time to go, it's time to do some remember Krishna. But she wasn't going to stand for that. So he got out of that one. And now there's another one. See, he's very big and physically strong and healthy, regardless of everything that's going on. He's very physically strong. So this is chapter 10, the discussion between, no, not chapter 10. Yeah, chapter 10. I thought it was, no, they've got the title wrong here. Yeah, I thought so. The actual title of the chapter, although they have it written as one thing, is actually something else. The title of chapter 10 is Maharaj Rahugana Meets Jad Bharat. In this chapter, Bharata Maharaj, the emperor of the whole world, having gone through 3 births, is now Jad Bharat, and was successfully accepted by King Rahugana, ruler of the states known as Sindhu and Sovira. The king forced Jad Bharat to carry his palanquin and chastised him because he did not carry it properly. A carrier of King Rahugana's palanquin was needed, and to fulfill this need, the chief carriers found Jad Bharat as the most likely person to do the work. He was therefore forced to carry a palanquin. Jad Bharat, however, did not protest this proud order, but humbly accepted the job and carried the palanquin. While carrying it, however, he was very careful to see that he did not step on an ant. And whenever he saw one, he would stop until the ant had passed. Because of this, he could not keep pace with the other carriers. The king within the palanquin became very disturbed and chastised Jad Bharat with filthy language. You can just imagine calling him all kinds of nasty names. But Jad Bharat, being completely freed from the bodily conception, did not protest. He proceeded carrying the palanquin. When he continued as before, the king threatened him with punishment. And being threatened by the king, Jad Bharat began to talk. He protested against the filthy language used by the king when the king chastised him. And the king, hearing the instructions of Jad Bharat, was awakened to his real knowledge. When he came to his consciousness, he understood that he had offended a great and learned saintly person. At that time, very humbly and respectfully, he prayed to Jad Bharat. He now wanted to understand the deep meaning of philosophical words used by Jad Bharat, and with great sincerity he begged his pardon. He admitted that if one offends the lotus feet of a pure devotee, he is certainly punished by the trident of Lord Shiva. So let's see what some of these great philosophical words that the king used, that Jad Bharat turned around. So, text 8. Thinking himself a king, King Rahugana was in the bodily conception and was influenced by material modes of passion and ignorance. Due to madness, he chastised Jad Bharat with uncalled for and contradictory words. Somebody becomes angry in the mode of passion, they say and do things that are extreme. Usually the mode of passion. They get angry. Mode of passion. Jad Bharat was a topmost devotee and the dear abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so the Lord was fully residing within Jad Bharat's heart. Although considering himself very learned, the king did not know about the position of an advanced devotee situated in devotional service, nor did he know his characteristics. Jad Bharat was the residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He always carried the form of the Lord within his heart. He was the dear friend of all living beings, and he did not entertain any bodily conception. He therefore smiled and spoke the following words. This is a little short purport here about anger, and when a devotee is angry, and when a materialist is angry. So the distinction between a person in the bodily conception and a person beyond the bodily conception is presented in this verse. In the bodily conception, King Rahugana considered himself a king and chastised Jada in so many unwanted ways. Being self-realized, Jada, who was fully situated on the transcendental platform, did not at all become angry. Instead, he smiled and began to deliver his teachings to King Rahugana. A highly advanced Vaishnava devotee is a friend to all living entities, and consequently, he's a friend to his enemies also. In fact, he does not consider anyone to be his enemy. Surida Sarvadehina. Sometimes a Vaishnava becomes superficially angry at a non-devotee, but this is good for the non-devotee. We have several examples of this in literature. In Vedic literature, Narada became angry with the two sons of Kuvera, Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, and he chastised them by turning them into trees. The result was that later they were liberated by Lord Krishna. The devotee is situated on the absolute platform, and when he is angry or pleased, there's no difference. Angry or pleased, there's no difference. For in either case, he bestows his benediction. A kick or a kiss, same thing. Hare Krishna, it's a benediction. So, next verse, text 9. So Maharaj, King Rahugana has spoken foully and nastily and angrily to Jada Bharat, using foul language, uncalled for. So this verse, the great Brahmin Jada Bharat said, "My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simple words of chastisement, for the body is a carrier. The load carried by the body does not belong to me, for I am the spirit soul. There is no contradiction in your statements, because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin. The body is the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body." So, was it in earlier verses that he said? Okay, so this is actually what the king said. The king saw that his palanquin was still being shaken by the carriers. He became angry and said, "You rascal, what are you doing? Are you dead despite the life within your body? Do you know that I am not, don't you know I am your master? You are disregarding me and are not carrying out my order. For this disobedience, I shall now punish you, just as Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, punishes sinful people. I shall give you proper treatment so you will come to your senses and do the correct thing. Surrender to me." So Jada Bharat is speaking here to try to help the king, because he's committing terrible offenses. And if he were to actually try to do something to Jada Bharat, like kill him or something, it wouldn't be very good for Rahugana. Not at all. Because he just saw what happened to the dacoits when they tried to kill him. And, so he's speaking to try to help the king, to enlighten him. He says, "There's no contradiction in your statements, because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin. The body's the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body. You have said that I am not stout and strong, and these words are befitting a person who does not know the distinction between the body and the soul. The body may be fat or thin, but no learned man would say such things of the spirit soul. As far as the spirit soul is concerned, I'm neither fat nor skinny. Therefore you are correct when you say that I am not very stout. Also, if the object of this journey and the path leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me. But because they relate not to me, but to my body, there's no trouble at all. Fatness, thinness, bodily and mental distress, thirst, hunger, fear, disagreement, desires for material happiness, old age, sleep, attachment for material possessions, anger, lamentation, illusion, identification of the body with the self, are all transformations of the material covering of the spirit soul. A person absorbed in material bodily conception is affected by these things, but I am free from all bodily conceptions. Consequently, I'm neither fat nor skinny, nor anything else you have mentioned. Fatness, thinness, bodily and mental distress, thirst, hunger, fear, disagreement, desires for material happiness, old age, sleep, attachment for material possessions, anger, lamentation, illusion, and identification of the body with the self are all transformations of the material covering of the spirit soul. My dear King, you have unnecessarily accused me of being dead though alive. In this regard, I can only say that this is the case everywhere, because everything material has its beginning and end. As far as your thinking that you are the king and master, and are thus trying to order me, this is also incorrect, because these positions are temporary. Today you're a king, and I am your servant, but tomorrow the position may be changed, and you may be my servant, and I your master. These are temporary circumstances created by providence. So in a previous life, Jada was a king, and he did have servants. So, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Prabhupada's purport, the sentence here, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the ultimate master, as explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Ekale Ishvara Krishna, Arasava Britya, the only master is Krishna, and everyone else is his servant. Forgetfulness of our relationship with the Supreme Lord brings about our suffering in the material world. So Jada continues, my dear king, if you still think that you are the king and that I am your servant, you should order me, and I should follow your order. I can then say that this differentiation is temporary, and it expands only from usage or convention. I do not see any other cause. In that case, who is the master and who is the servant? Everyone is being forced by the laws of material nature. Therefore, no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think that you are the master and that I am the servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you? Yeah. Everyone is forced by the laws of material nature. So no one is master. It's the karmic cycles. Someone is in a position of acting like a master, but they're not actually a master. Okay, Prabhupada's purport. It's said in Bhagavad Gita, Ahamamiti. One thinks, I am this body, and in this bodily relationship, he is my master, or he is my servant, or she is my wife, and he is my son. All these conceptions are temporary due to the inevitable change of body and the arrangement of material nature. We are gathered together like straws floating in the waves of an ocean, straws that are inevitably separated by the laws of the waves, material nature. In this material world, everyone is floating on the waves of the ocean of nescience, as described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Mikchemaya rabase yachabese kacha habadubai Jiva Krishna das Avishwas Karli Tearan Dukanai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states that all men and women are floating like straws on the waves of material nature. If they come to the understanding that they are the eternal servants of Krishna, they will put an end to this floating condition. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:37, Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava. Due to the mode of passion, we desire many things. And according to our desire or anxiety, and according to the order of the Supreme Lord, material nature gives us a certain type of body. For some time we play as master or servant, as actors play on the stage under someone else's direction. While we're in the human form, we should put an end to this nonsensical stage performance. We should come to our original constitutional position, known as Krishna consciousness. At the present moment, the real master is material nature. Daiviyesha gunamayi mamamaya dharatyaya. Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Under the spell of material nature, we are becoming servants and masters. But if we agree to be controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His eternal servants, this temporary condition ceases to exist. Jada continues, My dear king, you have said, you rascal, you dull, crazy fellow, I'm going to chastise you, and then you will come to your senses. In this regard, let me say that although I live like a dull, deaf, and dumb man, I'm actually a self-realized person. What will you gain by punishing me? If your calculation is true, and I am a madman, then your punishment will be like beating a dead horse. There will be no effect. When a madman is punished, he's not cured of his madness. So Bharata, he didn't enlist to carry the palanquin. He wasn't going to get a job to get some money. They saw him, he was big and strong, and they forced him to carry the palanquin. So he's carrying the palanquin, but he's not going to step on an ant. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So he makes the case here that actually I'm a self-realized person. So what good would it do to punish me? But if you still think that I'm just a madman, then what use is there in beating and punishing me then? It's not going to cure me of anything. I'm just a madman. He's talking his way out of this one. 14. Jada continues. Sukadeva Goswami said. So Sukadeva Goswami is telling this pastime to Maharaj Parikshit. And now we're going to hear from Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva Goswami said, he was giving the narration, now he's speaking directly. He says, O Maharaj Parikshit, when King Rahugana chastised the exalted devotee Jada Bharata with harsh words, That peaceful, saintly person tolerated it all and replied properly. Nescience is due to the bodily conception, and Jada Bharata was not affected by the false conception. Out of his natural humility, he never considered himself a great devotee, and he agreed to suffer the results of his past karma. Like an ordinary man, he thought that by carrying the palanquin, he was destroying the reactions of his past misdeeds. Thinking in this way, he began to carry the palanquin as before, not stepping on an ant. Okay, so this purport, the Prabhupada, an exalted devotee of the Lord never thinks that he is a Paramahamsa or a liberated person. He always remains a humble servant of the Lord. In all reverse conditions, he agrees to suffer the results of his past life. He never accuses the Lord of putting him into a distressed condition. These are the signs of an exalted devotee. Tat te nukampam sushamik shamana. Tate nukampam sushamik shamana. Mana. Something like that. When suffering reversed conditions, the devotee always considers that the reversed conditions are the Lord's concessions. He's never angry with his master. He's always satisfied with the position his master offers. In any case, he continues performing his duty in devotional service. Such a person is guaranteed promotion back home, back to Godhead. So there's the magic formula. Always satisfied in any situation and sees it as Krishna's arrangement. Never becomes angry with the Lord. I think in the Old Testament also, Job went through a similar thing, where everything was taken away. And everyone said, why don't you curse God now? Look what he's done to you. He's taken everything away, made you miserable. Why don't you curse him? Why don't you get angry with him? But Job, no, I don't. And the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. It's Hare Krishna. Such a person is guaranteed promotion back home, back to Godhead. And then there's the verse from Bhagavatam 10:14-8. Tate nukampam shushamik shamano punjana evatma kritam vipakam ridbag vapurbir vidan namaste jiveta yomukti pada padesa dayabak jiveti yomukti padesa dayabak. Translation, my dear Lord, one who constantly waits for your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him and goes on suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's not so much liberation. Lord Chaitanya's appearance is a real game changer. It's actually ecstatic love of Godhead. But sometimes devotee might find themselves in a very awkward situation, and this is the key to dealing with it. My Lord, one who constantly waits for your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him and goes on suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is eligible for liberation, has become his rightful claim. Hare Krishna. So Sukadeva Goswami continued, O best of the Pandu dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, the king of the Sindhu and Savira states, Maharaj Rahugana, had great faith in discussions of the absolute truth. Being thus qualified, he heard from Jada Bharata that philosophical presentation which is approved by all scriptures on the mystic yoga process and which slackens the knot in the heart. So he had faith in discussions of the absolute truth. And when he heard Jada Bharata speaking like that, his material conception of himself as a king was destroyed. He immediately descended from his palanquin and fell flat on the ground with his head at the lotus feet of Jada Bharata in such a way that he might be excused for his insulting words against the great Brahmin. He then prayed as follows. So here in the purport, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 4:2. Ivam parampara praptam imam rajashayo vidhu sa kalaneha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. The supreme science was received through the chain of disciplic succession, and saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, succession was broken. Therefore, the science as it appears to be lost. So here's a king hearing from an exalted Brahmin. So this is the initiation. This is the parampara. Hearing from a saintly person, taking shelter of hearing from him. So, let's read the purport. Though the disciplic succession, through the disciplic succession, the royal order was on the same platform as great saintly persons, Raja Rishis. Formerly, they could understand the philosophy of life and knew how to train the citizens to come to the same standard. In other words, they knew how to deliver the citizens from the entanglement of birth and death. Those were the great kings. Yudhisthira, Maharaj Parikshit, he goes, Maharaj Bharata in his life as the emperor. When Maharaj Dasarath ruled Ayodhya, the great sage Vishvamitra once came to him to take away Lord Ramachandra and Lakshman to the forest to kill a demon. When the saintly person Vishvamitra came to the court of Maharaj Dasarath, the king, in order to receive the saintly person, asked him, Ahistam yatat punar janma jayaya. He asked the sage whether everything was going on well in his endeavor to conquer the repetition of birth and death. So Dasarath was a saintly king, and he inquired, how is your spiritual path going? The whole process of Vedic civilization is based on this point. We must know how to conquer the repetition of birth and death. Maharaj Rahugana also knew the purpose of life. Therefore, when Jada Bharata put the philosophy of life before him, he immediately appreciated it. So he was acting like an idiot before, but now when he heard, Hare Krishna woke him up. This is the foundation of Vedic society. Learned scholars, Brahmins, saintly persons, and sages who were fully aware of the Vedic purpose advised the royal order how to benefit the general masses. Scholars, Brahmins, saintly persons, they were aware of the Vedic purpose, advised the royal order how to benefit the general masses. And by their cooperation, the general masses were benefited. They took guidance from saintly persons, from Brahmins, from realized souls. Therefore, everything was successful. Maharaj Rahugana attained this perfection of understanding the value of human life. Therefore, he regretted his insulting words to Jada Bharata, and he immediately descended from his palanquin and fell down at the lotus feet of Jada Bharata in order to be excused to hear from him further about the values of life, known as Brahma Jignasa, inquiry into the absolute truth. So wherever he was headed in his pelican, it wasn't all that important. He stopped. They'll have to wait wherever I was headed to, because we're here, and this is what we're doing. We're hearing transcendental messages of Godhead. At the present moment, high government officials are ignorant of the values of life, and when saintly persons endeavor to broadcast the Vedic knowledge, the so-called executives do not offer their respectful obeisances, but try to obstruct spiritual propaganda. Thus one can say that the former kingly government was like heaven, and that the present government is like hell. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada also said, we'll know this movement has been successful when the high court supreme judges are all wearing tilak. Then we'll know. So Maharaj Rahugana wants to know who Jada Bharata is, and he asks him, who are you, where did you come from? And then he says, he's not afraid of anything. He's not even afraid of a thunderbolt from Indra, but his only fear is an offending a Brahmin. And then he wants Jada Bharata to speak further to clarify what he's saying. He accepts him as a spiritual master. I consider your good self, this is Rahugana, the most exalted master of mystic power. You know the spiritual science perfectly well. You're the most exalted of all learned sages, and you have descended for the benefit of all human society. You have come to give spiritual knowledge, and you are a direct representative of Kapila, the incarnation of God, and the plenary portion of knowledge. I am therefore asking you, O spiritual master, what is the most secure shelter in this world? So he glorifies him, and then he asks him some questions. He continues, is it not a fact that your good self is the direct representative of Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To examine people and see who is actually a human being and who is not, you have presented yourself to be deaf and dumb. Are you not moving this way upon the surface of the world? I'm very attached to family life and worldly activities. I'm blind to spiritual knowledge. Nonetheless, I am now present before you and am seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life? You have said, I'm not fatigued from labor. End quote. Although the soul is different from the body, there is fatigue because of bodily labor, and it appears to be the fatigue of the soul. When you are carrying the pelican, there is certainly labor for the soul. This is my conjecture. And you have also said that the external behavior exhibited between master and servant is not factual, but although in this phenomenal world it's not factual, the products of the phenomenal world can actually affect things. That is visible and experienced. As such, even though material activities are impermanent, they cannot be said to be untrue. So he's asking all these questions. Hare Krishna. It's kind of challenging him. And there's several more verses where he's asking similar questions. So the next chapter, Jada Bharata then begins to clarify what he says. And we'll save that. Hare Krishna. Next time. That was chapter 10, 5th Canto, part 1, And this is next time, chapter 11, 5th canto, part 1. Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. A lot of good instruction in there. A lot of good instruction. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. I think I find myself sometimes doing like the Maharaj Rahugana thing, getting mad at someone and, and you're dumb, you're stupid, you're stupid. So, I find myself sometimes doing like that because I'm illusioned by who I think I am and what I think is going on here. And then other times, a little more clarity when somebody's doing it to me. You stupid, you don't know anything. And they do it to me too. Then I get to do the Jada Bharata thing and just kind of smile. You're an illusion. So, Hare Krishna. Krishna Chaitanya, Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya, keep chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's all about vibrating. Transcendental sound vibration, non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. You can't really understand it completely with your mind. I mean, you can look at it, but by chanting, actually vibrating the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. That's how it works. You can enter into this whole other experience of awareness and consciousness. And it's called Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.